So this week's episode starts the backstory for Yugiri, but also the whole idea of Save Saga, which, this being part one of at least a two-parter, might even be a three-parter, we don't know yet. It was going to be something pretty impactful, especially considering that Yugiri's been one of the most overlooked characters in Zombieland Saga. And to see how, you get to witness what would appear to be all the characters we've grown to know and love. Maybe some look slightly different, like Kotaro, looking like this boy who's just handing out sheets, and then you have literal, exact faces, body structures, everything. You're like, oh, there's Lily, there's this and that. But it's not actually them. Pretty sure that's meant to be their ancestors, because we've seen what Kotaro looks like back when he was a teenager. It says to me that this was supposed to not only make you familiar with who probably were a part of the Save Saga back in the day, but also to show that, for generations, this episode takes place in the late 1800s, it's been a very long time coming to try to save Saga, which saving Saga is still a very big question. It's like, what does that mean? Is it simply getting a name back? Is it something bigger? And it's still something that is fuzzy for sure, because without a doubt, saving Saga has to be the final punch, the final, oh, we didn't see that coming before the series officially wraps up, right? And to watch an episode like this where you have the legendary courtesan, right? She's someone who literally became so legendary that no one paid for her. So she became someone who was really oh my god, here she is, she's so legendary. The person who trained her and gave her everything, let her go live in Saga. But she kind of had this very peaceful but lonely life. And I would love to say that this episode completely changes my opinion on Yugiri. I feel like I know her so much more, but no, this is part one, so it's just the intro to what her character is, and what an intro it was. You end the episode with seemingly our main character in this episode, at the very least, best friend, dropping a note to this homeless guy who then runs off. I'm like, okay, well this is going to be an assassination plotline for sure. He clearly doesn't like that his friend is getting a little too acquainted with someone who's encouraging his delusional behavior, at least that's how he views it. And he just gives me some very big red flags vibes. There's a point where Yugiri literally dodges and attacks, and I'm like, holy shit, she feels like this man's a menace. And then you get a nice peaceful dinner scene, they're drinking, and then he leaves after talking about how violent the country has become. Seemingly he's up to no good, it feels crystal clear in that department, but it's interesting to see a character who's basically Kotaro trying to do the same thing by passing out information saying we need to retake Saga, and how you're seeing characters who look identical to the idol group. And it's just interesting because even if they're not direct ancestors to our main characters, what it says is that there's always been a group that has formed and used the times in order to try to take back Saga. In present day, it's idol music using zombie magic, which we get in this episode. Gramps here apparently used to be able to do so, and we see, once again, a zombie dog. So it's interesting that there's always been a group in some way to do so, and I'm curious if by the time maybe this episode or this arc ends, right, is Yugiri going to die? Will this man bring her back by using the same zombie magic? They'll carry on with their plan. Eventually it doesn't work out, they pass on, and then of course Kotaro revives Yugiri in the present day. It feels like we're kind of building up to something in that nature, and I think for an episode that has been hyped up among a lot of fans, myself included, hell, we were hyping it up before we even knew if it existed. This was an episode to not only just show what makes her so important, but I think also give us a better understanding of the long-term vision of saving Saga. Something that's felt a little silly on paper, but seeing how big it's been of a moral booster for so many, I think is really intriguing. In a lot of ways, you might be able to say, well, Yugiri's backstory is more of a way to put more of a focus on the main plot, but I think that's perfectly okay. She's always been a character who's been quiet, who's been nurturing, who's been someone who felt like a big sister mother figure, by also having a wide variety of talents. She's never been someone who's needed to talk overly much. It's not someone like Tai who you're like, okay, when she talks, it's going to be really shocking because, she's just kind of a clueless zombie right now. But someone like Yugiri is someone who naturally invokes authority, and when you look at this group, your natural thought is she's the most mature of them. So it's nice to have an episode where that same personality carries through, and no matter what life throws at her, she's always there to feel like she's the adult in the situation. Of course, this backstory is not going to end peacefully, we know that for sure. I mean, literally everyone ends up dead in this show if they've been revived as a zombie. But I think it's interesting how many, like, familiar flashbacks to Season 1, like, oh my god, someone's about to get hit by a car, when it's really just a man running with a cart, and then pops out Ty, right, who actually had a normal speaking voice. I think there's just a lot of charm to this episode for being so beautiful, arguably one of the most beautiful Zombieland Saga episodes yet. I mean, if you have cherry blossoms and just the pellets, the leaves are flowing everywhere, if you're not making that drop dead gorgeous, you're literally missing out on one of the anime tropes everyone pretty much loves. And that is beautiful Sakura cherry blossom trees. Just go nuts with that visuals, and this episode was like half of that. Bright scenes, just everything about it was just exploding with vibrance and colors out the ass. And I think that made it a very intriguing episode because, I mean, it's a different culture, it's way back in the past, and just seeing the peacefulness before something sinister is starting to build, I think is quite interesting. Like, seemingly you would say, oh, well, 2 more people are willing to join up the cause of Take Back Saga, but on the flip side, his seemingly best friend of 2 years might have called a hit on her or is setting up something a bit more sinister. Maybe he's passing knowledge. Maybe it's not a hitman. Maybe it's simply he's passing a message to government officials to take care of issues before they become too big because, well, he understands that the times are changing where his friend isn't, right? This was just an incredible episode. I was so excited after seeing the preview last week, and this episode absolutely lived up to what I thought I wanted, while also just giving me more information and more focus on the main plot of Saving Saga, something I've kind of glossed over for many weeks now, and it's really feeling like it's something I need to keep my focus on a bit more. Really excited for part 2. I have no idea how long it's going to last. The preview doesn't give too much to really go off of, I would say, considering how other previews have definitely given away a lot, so this could very well be a 3-parter for all we know, but I'm excited to see where they're going to go with next week's episode, of course. A part of me does think a 3-parter would be interesting because given the fact that they have characters identical to the cast in the main timeline here, the present timeline, it would make sense if there was a 3-parter just because we'd be able to have at least a moment with all of them if they are going to be part of Saving Saga, but then again, that may not be intentional. Maybe only some of these characters will actually attempt to save Saga in this past sequence. So it's going to be interesting because I do think a lot of people are going to say, oh my god, they're all back in the past, like maybe they've always, they just kept getting revived and revived and revived. No, I think it's supposed to be directed as ancestral or just more for the anime viewers to understand like, oh, that's clearly a character who also got involved in a situation, maybe not idol music, but maybe just general theater, right? It's something that I like. Anime does it every so often when, especially if you have any sort of like flashback scenes and you're like trying to say, oh, their ancestors or characters similar to them in the past had the same drive and vision. Though I do expect there's going to be a lot of comments talking about how like, oh, see, Ty and all these other characters were back in the past before, but I really don't think that's intentional, and I'd be truly shocked if next week comes around and like it confirms as such. I do think it's supposed to be more like of a metaphor, if not, it's just ancestral ties, which I think would be really cool. But let me know your thoughts and feelings down below, your favorite moment, and where do you think this backstory is overall going to go, obviously besides the inevitable, which is Yugiri dying, because she has to be revived eventually in the future. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you're happy new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.